thank you very much for being willing to spend your time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So what we're going to be talking about today basically is as you raise rents, how can you figure out how much that's actually going to impact your bottom line and what you can put in your pocket. And so it's going to be fairly brief and fairly easy, and we're only going to talk about rents as an item here, but I think hopefully that'll be useful to everybody. So we'll have some questions at the end as usual. And James, you're going to kind of let people come in as they come in, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So we'll wait basically 1 more minute. Are you seeing anybody else in the waiting room?
Let me double check. Not right. Nope,
Okay.
not right now.
All right. Well, then we're going to go ahead and get going. So we're respectful of people's time here. So I only have a couple, 3 slides here, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So one of the things that raising rents is always one of the easier things to do to increase your cash flow, but it has to be done in context with the overall picture of the property, or you have people moving out, or you have people starting to get unhappy. And so there's 2 pieces to this that I always try and take a look at, is where are you in relation to the competition in terms of what your rents are? So you really have a sense of where you can go. So you can ask a realtor, or you can go to Rent-O-Meter or someplace else to figure out what the average rents are. And that's pretty accurate. But what it doesn't tell you is what is coming with those rents in relation to your competition, in relation to what they're providing, et cetera. Right. So if you know from Rent-O-Meter, or you know from looking at what somebody will tell you what the average rents are in the area, that you have $100 upside, let's just say, then that's a good first view. But what it doesn't tell you is knowing exactly who your competition is. Who are the people that are close to you that have other apartment buildings or other houses? And what is included in that rent, right? So some properties are going to include water or trash in the rent. Some may allow pets for extra without any extra money. Some may provide something else. And so the idea of comparing dollar to dollar is only one thing you want to do. Then the next step you have to do is to do a little bit of secret shopping, or do a little bit of calling to find out what that includes. It may be that your property is newer, that it has more amenities, that the units are in better shape, so that if somebody was looking at both, that yours is preferable. But it may be the other way around too. So you just have to know. And that's kind of that 4th bullet there. What do their units look like? Rent comparisons. We basically have our property management companies do rent comparisons at least yearly to figure out where you are in relation to the rents. As we are moving into a more of a buyer's market, and or where we are having some vacant units, the other thing you need to look at in terms of getting vacant units filled is what is the competition doing in terms of providing concessions to get people to move in? So are they giving rent breaks? Are they giving move-in specials where you have a $99 move-in? Or that the third month is half off. And that just comes from also calling, it comes from looking at others. So before you decide how much you can raise rents, or if you can, you need to have a pretty good sense of not only what is the average rents, but what do those average rents include? All right, so let's go to the next one. So this next slide is basically, whoops, I'm sorry, trying to figure out what those rents do to your bottom line. So one of the things I think I've talked about before is that, for me at least, everybody's going to make their own decisions, but for me at least, I'm going to try and keep our rent slightly below what the competition does. And I'm going to do that because if I can provide a place where somebody feels safe, it's well kept, it is safe, secure, you keep up with things, then you keep your turnover down. And turnover is your single biggest controllable expense. And we've talked about that before, right? So anytime somebody leaves, you need to plan on losing at least 1 month's rent. You may be lucky and not lose that much, but it's at least 1 month and not infrequently 2 months rent. So if you think about that, if you have a turnover and your rent is $1,200 to $1,500 and you have a month turnover, you have just decreased your rents, what you're bringing in income, by $1,200. A lot of your expenses don't go down that much, right? And so you have an impact to your bottom line. And so I can't really emphasize enough how important it is to try and keep your turnover down. So that leads to the next bullet point, which is be careful not to raise rents where people can't afford it. And right now, that is a really big issue. As we went through COVID and we couldn't evict people, there were virtually no vacancies. And what that led to was that landlords and property management companies raised rents and kept raising rents and kept raising rents because people didn't have a lot of choice. So choice is coming back. There are more vacancies, but you still have rents higher than they were before by a significant amount. And then what that has basically done is it has made the affordability index much worse. And so people can't really afford a lot of this. And so not only do you have vacant apartments now because the evictions are underway, but what you also have is a fewer number of people who can qualify based on their income for your units, particularly if you are in middle class kinds of properties. And so when people can't afford it, when you raise rents a lot, people move out or you have to evict people. So in my experience, if you keep rents somewhere around 5% below your competition, you are in better shape, unless the quality of what you offer is significantly better. But even then, be careful. So if people have to get really upset with you before they're going to move, and when they go to look for other places, if they can't find places that are cheaper or are not significantly more expensive, they may well decide not to move, because it's going to cost people typically 2 to 3 months rent equivalent to move. So what we're trying to do is to keep people. So much better to prevent the turnover than to figure out what the new turnover, what your new rents are going to do to your bottom line. And I hope that makes sense. All right, so what I want, I don't know if any of you have been following. This is an example of one of the properties we talked about before in terms of looking at what we can get for property, for rental unit, and how does that impact. So if I'm buying something new, so let me just kind of look at this and walk you through this slide. This is basically the essence of what we're talking about here. So if I have a property that has 54 units, okay? So why do I say my occupancy is 49? Because I know in general, I have a 10% vacancy factor. And so when I figure out how many units are going to be occupied, I'm always going to keep that 10% vacancy in mind. So in this case, I'm using 5 units as a vacancy factor, which means that my upper amount of what I have occupied is 49. Now, if I get more, I'm in gravy. If I get less, if I'm estimating I'm at 52 or 53 units, and I end up at 48 or 49, then I am below where I'm predicting, and that can cause me problems down the road. Okay, so now let's take a look at this 2-bedroom apartment, which is that second line. In this property, there are 32 2-bedroom units. And my occupancy, what I'm calculating there, is 29, right? My current rent for those is $1,050. But when I look to see what current rents in the area are, it's $1,400. So what I basically have is a $350 upside. Is everybody seeing that? That compared to where I am now, what the rents are now, and what Rent-A-Meter, other people say it is, I have a potential $350 upside, right? But if I can't really raise rents $350 at one time on the people who are already there. Now, if I have new people coming in, I have vacancies, I can bring them in at $1,375 or even $1,400 if I want. But if I take the people who are already occupying these units and go from $1,050 to $1,400, a lot of people can't make that, or you're going to have evictions and stuff. So what I'm going to try and do is figure out what's reasonable. In this case, I'm saying, okay, I can raise things about $75 per year. All right. So from 1050 plus 75, if you kind of look there in that year one, then I have 29 units that I can rent at $1,125. That's $75 above the 1050 times 12 months. That is $391,500 in income, right? So let's go down to that 1-bedroom unit. And there are 22 units there, and I'm going to figure I can have 20. So 900, right, times 12, And so my rent now is 900 and I can go up to 1100. So I have a $200 upside. Again, that's 75 per month, right? So I can already see here that I did an oops in my calculations. So on this one bedroom. So I said that basically it's 22 units, but we're only going to calculate we can fill 20. Well, I did a math error there. My apologies. So that really should be 20 times 975 times 12. And that gets me what my upside is for year one in this. All right, so now let's move over to the 2-bedroom units in year two. I can raise it another 75. That brings me up to 1,200. And I'm going to do the same math. And in year three, I'm going to go up to 1,275. And I'm still not at 1,400. But my expenses aren't going to go up by that much every month. And so I'm still to the good. So I would rather not have people move and be below rents than all of a sudden have a lot of people moving out. So one of the things I do is to try and calculate how much I can raise rents without having a lot of people leaving. And if one of the things I want to do is to keep good residents, then if I am below market for a couple of 3 years, I'd rather do that than have a lot of turnover and have to try and find good tenants again. All right. So now you can see I tried to draw lines there, those kind of lines over to the bottom line there. And I want to tell you what I did there. So a lot of mistakes I see when people start trying to figure out where they are or where they're going to be on their income is that they will take year one and they will put that number down under year one, right? But the fact is that you are not going to raise rents on people who have leases until their lease date goes up. You are not going to walk in on day one and raise rents by $75. So what you end up having is that across year one, you are going to take everybody from where they were, where their rent was until the new rent. And rather than try and calculate on a monthly basis, what I end up doing is just moving how much my income is going to be from the things I am going to do in year one to the beginning of year two. So I have those rents, that work I have done in year one throughout the entire year two. But if I were to put that in year one, I am going to fall short. If I put what I did in year two at the beginning of year two, I'm going to fall short. And so what I do to be conservative is that I just take all of that income from year one, and I am going to move it over to the beginning of year two. And so I'm calculating that that is going to my income all of year two, because I have done that work in year one. All right. So you can see in year two, what I gain, I start beginning to take that in all of year three. And what I gained in year three, I take at the beginning for all of year four. I only did 3 years here. So the other thing is that you have expenses of somewhere around 50% that you are going to take out. So of that $648,900, 50% of that about is expenses. So you're going to subtract that to get what your net operating income is. And then you have to subtract your mortgage and the interest on your mortgage from that number, right? But what it actually does, so in my world, the bottom line is my net operating income. And so if I take 50% about of that 648,000, I have about 325,000 as my net operating income, right? And so that's what I know what I think I'm going to have in year 2. So I'm hoping that is clear. And I can figure out how much each unit is going to change to my bottom line by calculating what those numbers would be at 1,050 times 29 units, or 900 times 20 units, to figure out how much change I have, what is the amount of change. All right, so that's basically what I want to say, is two or three things to kind of hit the highlights again here. Is that, one, you don't take all of the increases in rents in the year that you think you're going to do it, you move it to the next year. You still have 50% expenses or so, which gives you a sense of what your new net operating income is. Even though your rents go up, your expenses are going to go up too. All right, so I think that's basically what I wanted. If you want to have more information, to look at things more, you can go to, we have a webinar there. It's about 2 hours. It covers some of this and some other things. And if you just want to see what's on our website or what we have posted up on YouTube, you can go to that. All right, let me come back and let me just open it up for questions that people may have. And I'm going to let James well, let's just open up. We don't have that many people on at this point. So
Right.
Just go ahead and open up your things and ask questions as you want. This isn't exactly a simple topic, so if I wasn't very clear, I wouldn't be too surprised. So please feel free to ask any questions.
And Nicole, I'll put the link for the free webinar up in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you, James.
So this is Joyce.
Okay, hi, Joyce.
Hi. So let's assume that in year 4, you wanted to sell.
Okay.
Have you been able to do calculations that show what the net what the increase is going to be, so that you can get a higher sales price from when you bought it?
Yeah, you are going to be using the net operating income to calculate the value of the property. And so the net operating income is always it's reflective of a return on your on the cash that you put in. So if we sort of say that you bought this at a 7.5 cap and you're selling it at an 8 cap, then your net operating income is going to be whatever that net operating income is, which is income from all sources minus expenses, all of your expenses, with the exception of your mortgage and your interest on your mortgage, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so your net operating income is going to be that number divided by 7%, which is 0.07, or if you're selling it at an 8 cap, divided by 0.08.
Okay.
And so that's what the value is. So your value coming in depends on where you bought it, and how much you have increased the value is a direct reflection of the NOI. And that really determines where you can sell it. Did that answer that?
Yes, most definitely.
And I was just going to
Thank you.
add, if you decide you're going to sell early, so like in year 3, you can also give out kind of as an incentive to people that are coming in going, look, we're at 1275, market rent is 1400. So you still got a huge upside if you buy this property at my price, and you'll still be able to make money.
Yes, I see that on the the offers quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, you need to take those with a bit of a grain of salt. Because what they're basically saying is that when we were at the height of the pandemic and we could get 1,400 or 1,500 for a unit, we're telling you that that's what the new rents are. And I am skeptical that over the long term, you're going to be able to be at that number for everybody, going forward. So that's where some of the figuring out what your competition, where their rents are, what's happening to rents. And so brokers and sellers are always going to put the rosiest picture they can on something. And we have to trust but verify. And that would be a place where I do a lot of verification, because that really impacts what your property is going to be worth.
I understand.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah. Other questions?
Hey, Nicole, I have a question that came in privately. So if I read this correctly, when you are raising the rents by, in this instance, $75 per month, have you gone in and done the entire rehab, or do you wait until the lease is up, do the rehab, and then do the full amount, offer the full amount to the person that's there now, or get somebody new, if that makes sense?
It does, and I think that's kind of a mixed answer. So let me say, all I am showing here is what the current rents are, right? So how do you increase this from where you are up to what the rents are going for? We're not saying anything about the condition of your property. This is just market rents are $10.50, what you are selling or what you're renting for, and what the market rents are at $1,400. Doesn't have anything to do with rehabbing or repositioning a unit. So if for me to be able to get to that 1,400 is based on repositioning, in other words, updating the unit, then I would need to show that. So I would show that separately, because I need to know what it's going to cost me to increase that unit and how much I can increase that unit once it has been rehabbed. So it really depends on, in terms of repositioning, repositioning is the same as rehab in an apartment building, in a multifamily property. All right. So what you're really saying is rehabbing. The difference in multifamily is that we use repositioning to mean both physical rehab and changing the tenant profile. So increasing or changing who you want in the unit. If I don't have a really expensive, if I need to put in $2,500 to a unit, say, to increase rents a bit more, I can do that a little bit at a time. I'm probably going to start with my vacant units, right? And then as people move, you may add them. if you have tenants who are really good tenants, because we want to reward good tenants, is that they get fairly high priority too, and that you just work with them as to how you're going to do that so that they don't have to move. Right. If it is a significant rehab, like $8,000 to $10,000 a unit, typically what I am going to do is go building by building or floor by floor, because it really streamlines my cost with contractors. And I am going to temporarily move residents to another unit if I have them, or I am going to have to evict them to get the rehab done. Did that answer that question? There's a lot of what ifs in there.
Right. I think you did. I haven't heard back from the person, but that kind of prompts kind of the next question. In terms of turnover in the industry, what is the average turnover and what is your average turnover?
So the average, now I don't have the information since we started doing COVID, because nobody was moving, right? And so, but typically it's about a year. So there's a lot of turnover. Now, there's certainly people who don't turn over and live in a place for a long time, but the average numbers are about a year. And our average numbers are, depending on the property, 3 to 5 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, but it's a different view of how you treat your residents. So part of it is rent, but part of it is also how you maintain their units, how you address their issues, how you upkeep the property. And so you're actually treating good residents like they're gold, because they're actually paying for your mortgage. They're paying off your property.
Right.
And a lot of people, we just ignore the people who are the best. We ignore people who are good residents, and we focus on the people who are your pains that they don't pay or whatever. And it just, I think people have it wrong, frankly.
Right. And you talk a lot about that in the course in terms of what are the things you can do to keep the good people and get rid of the bad people, which at the end of the day, keeping the good people, the ones that are paying your mortgage, getting rid of the bad people is just something that you have to do, but not to focus on them so much, to focus on the good people.
Yep, I agree with that. Have we got other questions on any other topic that people want? It's about 7:05.
If
Go
this
ahead.
is Joyce, this is Joyce. I've heard some folks say that the good tenants, they'll look at things to reward them, such as when they renew, they might get a new washer and dryer, because they might have a much older model. And sometimes they'll come in and say, well, we're going to upgrade your carpet as a reward for them to, continue to stay. And that's only for the good tenants.
Yeah, those are good things. We do some of that too. It's instead of having renewing your lease, we do an anniversary. Come get your anniversary gift. We want to, and so you offer them something. Now, most of the time, we are not going to be offering a new washer and dryer, say, which is probably going to come in at $500 or $600, unless we are trying to upgrade them throughout the property, and we will offer it to our good tenants first. But a ceiling fan or different lighting structures or changing out faucets or something like that, painting a room or changing the carpet or something like that, that increases the value of the unit as well. And you let people pick from a couple, 3 choices. But that's a really good idea, Joyce.
Thank you. Thank you for your input too.
You betcha. From anybody else?
Nicole, does the training program have like models where you can input data and kind of get results, or it kind of, input output type of thing?
Are you talking about for like rents and stuff? Like
Yeah,
what,
so
when
even
you,
analyzing a property to see if it's viable.
yeah, we actually do. And I'm going to let James talk about that a little bit because he actually, we have a Excel kinds of programs where you put in the numbers and it shows you where you are in several things. So James, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. So a couple of things. The way we teach the course is we recommend that you actually do it by hand first. And we teach you how to do that because the idea is by the time you get to the underwriting spreadsheet, which will just kick out the numbers, you have to know what numbers make sense to put in. And I have had people, because we give, customer service, if you will. I've had people send me spreadsheets that haven't done that part about doing it by hand. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you're at 75% expenses. Did you actually kind of go through this and understand what you're doing? And because they didn't do it by hand first, they don't understand that the number's way, way off. So, and Nicole has had tremendous success doing it by hand. And when I met her, she was still doing it by hand for the most part. I mean, she had an Excel spreadsheet, but the new spreadsheet really kind of walks you through going, okay, kind of what you see on the screen now. Year one, I'm going to do 10 units and I'm going to raise them by $75. And then it gives you a bottom number. Year two, I'm going to raise it by so. Year three, I'm going to raise it by so. And at the bottom, it tells you what your percentage return is on your investment. So if you're going to have investors and you have a split of 60-40, you can tell your investor, okay, this is what we're going to do. And at the end of year one, Mr. or Mrs. Investor, you're going to make so-and-so on your money. So it really gives you a strong foundation to be able to either you yourself, if you're buying it yourself, be able to see how much money you're going to make. Or if you're talking to investors, you can show them in black and white, here's exactly what I think is going to happen, no guarantees, but based on the input on this spreadsheet, here's what I think is going to happen. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then we have another presentation. This is kind of multifamily. At 7:30, we have a presentation if anybody wants to stick around. And I'm going to let Jane or Sharon talk about what they're going to be talking about. And then I'd be happy to hang around and answer any questions people may have on any topic until that gets ready to start, right? But let me turn it over to Jane or Sharon right now to talk about what's coming up at 7:30.
Hey guys, so we're predominantly in the single family realm. So but this is great for multifamily. We're learning a lot here too. We're going to talk about the HUD Home Store, which has been very good to us. And it's going to be a brief overview of what actually HUD Home Store is and all that stuff. But it's more going to be show you how we've been able to acquire 24 homes through the HUD Home Store. So just kind of going through the website and some things you'll need and some things you'll strive to do. And hopefully it's an easy way to get houses without negotiating and at a discount.
And online.
And online.
Yeah, so I think I'm looking forward to listening to that too. So I'm respectful of your time. If you want to stick around, please stick around. If you want to go take a break, you can log off and come back on. Other people are going to be joining at about just before 7:30, but I'm open to any questions that you would like to ask of me or James. And I'm actually throwing Sharon and Jane into this. If you have any single family questions, we can put them on the hot seat too. What do you think, women?
Absolutely.
Sure.
We're always sitting on the hot seat.
I know you are.
Help.
All right, anybody have any other questions that they would like to just, or anything you'd like to talk about?
So Nicole, when you look at year over year in raising rents, you can only raise rents when a lease is expiring. Is that correct?
It, most of the time, but let me say that, I, I don't always have leases. When we go in and a new person comes in, you always do a 1 to 2 year lease with them. But after that, I don't really bother. I will have house rules or apartment rules or park rules that have the ability for me to hold people accountable to. But it doesn't do is have it so that that I can't evict somebody, or I can't get rid of somebody, or that if somebody really has an issue, they can't move out. And the truth of the matter is, particularly in residential multifamily kinds of properties, if somebody stops paying or just leaves, eviction courts, judges are not going to hold people to those leases. So you may get, 1 month, but you aren't going to be able to hold people to, if they move out in month 3 of a 12-month lease, you aren't going to be able to hold people to it. They're just going to leave. And the judges are going to let them do that, which is significantly different than if you have a commercial lease where theoretically businesses knowing what they're going into, then courts tend to hold those people accountable. So I don't always have leases after the year 1 or 2. It just depends on the property and where it is and what the climate is like with the with the judicial there. So for instance, Baltimore City is so pro-resident that judges automatically think, as far as I can tell, that landlords are at fault all the time, every time. And they don't hold anybody accountable. They don't hold residents accountable for anything. So it really depends on the jurisdiction. What I do try and make sure, though, that if I don't have a lease, the people are signing the agreement of, here are the rules and regulations of this property. And I can evict if they don't do that, and that's in that agreement. But people can, if somebody has an issue where they need to move out, they can give you a month's notice and leave, or 2 months notice. And you can give people a month or 2 month notice and tell people that you're doing something different, or that they're not meeting the property standards, and you want the property back. I don't know what else to, does that answer your question? It was probably pretty roundabout there.
Yes, I was just curious of the numbers, I guess, if
What numbers, son?
what's on the screen currently, just about the kind of NOI growth with the rent raises year after year.
Okay, so on average, so this was an example of something where you might be taking over a property where there is a lot of variation between what's currently charged as rent and what the going market rent is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are at market rent, on average, you are going to increase rents 3 to 5% a year. But a lot of times that is going to be dependent on the competition. So in times where things are stagnant or rents are going down, you may well not be able to raise the rents. You may be stable. That's why those yearly rent surveys are important. But and so it depends on where you are now and what the upside is. So I can't really tell you. I'd say a lot of properties are at or close to market rents. And or right now they're trying to get that inflated market rent that they were getting at COVID times. And they're having a little bit of trouble right now.
Yeah.
If I can just make a comment in there. So you're still able to find, we've had a student find a couple of these deals, one in the last 12 months and once before that, in the Baltimore, Washington area where we're based, that have been able to find, I think on one, it was $400 on the market. And this last one that he bought, I don't know if it's in downtown Baltimore or in Baltimore County. It's a small, I mean, it was like a little 12 unit or something like that. But the spread was $300 because the original owner had had the property for a long time and was concerned that people would move out. So we never raised the rents. So what Alex is going to do is every year he's going to raise the rents between $75 and $100 and not really have to do any kind of upgrades in the property because market rents for exactly what his property is are $300 higher. So the deals are still out there. But to Nicole's point, you have to be careful that, you know, the rent you're thinking about isn't some pie in the sky number that, you know, somebody came up with after COVID.
That's a good point, James. That really is a good point. It's just, those deals are out there. You just, when you're looking at a property, you need to figure out how you can increase your income and or decrease your expenses. And it's different for every property. That's why we do so much due diligence, right? This was just this presentation was about how do you know what raising rents is going to do to your bottom line? And that was what I was just trying to deal with there. Other questions? All right, well,
I have another one if no one has.
oh,
anything.
good.
So I used to, I lived in Chicago. Maybe this is a downtown high-rise thing, but they had plans where, let's say you wanted to lease for 6 months, it was more expensive than if you got a lease for a year, more expensive if you did it for 2 years. I don't see that. I haven't seen that in many other places. Is that something you do, or is that something you see in the market where it's not short-term like Airbnb short-term, but there's different options based on the time you want your lease to be, and the shorter it is, the more expensive it is?
I think that's pretty common.
Okay.
The thing is that a lot of landlords, a lot of property management companies won't do anything under a 12-month lease because of the turnover. And so if you figure the rent is going to, I'm making this up. So if you figure the rent is $1,200 a month, and it's a 6-month lease, and I know that on average, I have a month downturn from the time somebody leaves until I can get it filled again. So that means I'm going to be out $1,200. So if I'm going to let a 6-month lease go in, then I have to make up that $1,200 across those 6 months, which is an extra $200 a month. But giving people choice is a way to begin to think about increasing your income. So it can be shorter leases. You can get somebody into a 2-year lease if they have good references and they have been stable. You remember, I'm hearkening back to most landlord courts aren't going to hold people to that. But if somebody signs a 2-year lease, you can tell them that you won't raise the rents in year 2, that it's a flat rate for 2 years, right? That's a benefit. The other thing we see a lot is you'd allow people. So a lot of people have a lot of their bills come due the very first of the month, right? Being able to pay the rent and the bills the first of the month is challenging. So you can offer to let them pay on the 15th of the month. I'm making that up. and you're going to charge them extra. You can break that into 2 payments and charge a little bit extra. So it depends on what you want to do and how you want to do it. If I was going to go to, 2 payments a month, or I was going to let people pay on the 15th, then the only way I'm going to let them do that is A, to charge a little more, and B, to have some kind of electronic deposit set up so I make sure that I'm going to get my money, right? But I'm thinking about a lot of people on disability or Social Security or other things who don't get paid until the 15th. And so a lot of those people are actually stuck with late payments because they can't pay on the 1st of the month, or they have a very hard time getting there. So, a lot of my properties are, B- properties, C properties, where I have a lot of blue collar people. And in a number of them, we have people on Social Security, on disability, on VA pensions, and a lot of those tend to come in the middle of the month. And I don't want to put somebody who's on a fixed income in a situation where they're having to pay a late fee every month because they're in a situation where they don't get their income. But I also want to protect my downside. I want to protect my backside, not my downside. So does that make sense? That there's a lot of things you can do creatively that helps your bottom line, but also helps out your residents.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was some type of rule or something against it that only certain places could do.
No, there's no rules that I know of. I would suspect the reason is there's afraid if they're less than a year's lease, the people are going to leave and they're going to have a problem with the turnover and the vacancy and what that's going to do to their income. And so you're just going to have to make it up.